For Intima Records and Steinberger Guitars, this is Thane Tierney with Alan Holdsworth in his home studio in beautiful Tustin, California, on a sweltering hot day in the middle of July. We're going to talk with him a little bit about his new Intima album, Secrets, which will be coming out here shortly, and talk about his playing and some of his techniques and recording methods. And I guess you mixed the album right in here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right over there at that console that no one can see.
Yeah.
Earlier when we were talking, you said that this time you were able to do some things in terms of mixing that you hadn't been able to do on your earlier albums. Just exactly what did you do?
Well, usually it's a money problem. If you go into the studio and you're mixing an album, you have a set amount of time to do it in, and you usually try and do it as quickly as you can. And quite often, I've made a lot of mistakes. So then we finish up having to remix a song, or then you run out of money or whatever, and you can't. So you quite often don't get exactly what you want, but nobody ever does. But this time, doing it at home, although I don't have the same equipment as a lot of the, like a really awesome studio, the thing is that I can make up for it by the amount of time that I can take on the mixing. For example, if I started mixing one song, instead of just getting it ready to mix and then putting it down onto the 2-track, I'd spend more time listening to it. I'd get a rough mix-up or a pretty good mix and make a DAT tape of it, make cassettes, play it in the car, play it in my friend's house, play it in a lot of different systems. Therefore, being able to go back to the board then and make the necessary changes was a big thing for me on this record.
As a result, you probably must feel pretty good about it, having heard it both on the studio monitors and, as you said, in a variety of environments.
I think it turned out good with regard to that, that you can listen to it on a lot of different, in a lot of different environments, and it sounds pretty good. I was quite pleased with it, as pleased as you can be with anything that you can.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, with each successive album, it seems that critics and fans alike are always racing to the dictionary for new adjectives, trying to find one more superlative that they can say about your playing. How do you feel about the way you played on the record?
Well, I'm never 100% happy with anything that I do, but I think that's normal. And I just try and do the best I can at any point in time. The thing that keeps me going is that if I look back to an older album and I can hear some progress, which up till now, thankfully, I can, then that's enough inspiration for me to keep going. If I listened to an album 2 albums ago and thought, oh boy, I don't hear much of an improvement from then I'd maybe take up engineering full time and put the guitar away.
Well, let's take a listen to the first track from your new album, Secrets. It's called Joshua. We just heard a little bit of Joshua from Alan Holdsworth's new album on Intima Records called Secrets. Let's talk a little bit about the actual guitars, the stuff that you're playing on that, and as a musician, I'm kind of interested in how you go about getting the sound that you do and what kind of equipment and just your mental approach in order to get the kind of sounds and what you do both on leads and during the rest of the time.
Well, I think most people have a kind of like a sound in their head. That's what I like to think of it as. And for me, like with the guitar or anything else, it's just like a quest to try and get closer to that. And for this particular track, it was pretty straightforward in terms of equipment. I used a Steinberger guitar, which in fact I use it exclusively now. I don't even have a wood guitar anymore. And I used a 50 caliber boogie, and that was it. That's it. It's pretty simple setup for this particular track. I usually record guitar like that way. Sometimes I record the processing if it was important to the sound, like it has been on some of the past recordings. But with a lead guitar thing or a solo sound, usually that I like to try and get as good a sound as I can, and then add the processing later.
On the mental approach to going into a studio and recording as opposed to playing live, how do you psych yourself up to get that one perfect solo, or get as close to that? It's because you can't feed off the energy of the audience that you can when you're on a stage.
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, it's really hard. I mean, the recording poses totally different problems for me. Is that, like, especially if it was done in an overdub situation, if you play things like live, like some of the tracks that we've done, and in the past have been live, and somehow they're always easier than when you start to go in and overdub something, because it's really difficult to make it sound like it was part of the thing, you know, the whole event. But I've really, so I really listen to if it's an overdub situation, I really usually listen to the basic track a lot until I actually know exactly what everybody else is doing. That way I find it easier to play a solo with it, because then I understand where all the little things are going to be, and I try and make it sound as natural as possible.
We just heard a little bit of Spokes from Alan Holdsworth's new intimate album, Secrets. This time, you wrote about half of the compositions on the album before you were the primary composer. Does that mean you're getting out of the composing business and more into the playing, or does it really call on sort of two different sets of skills that are complementary?
Well, to answer the first question, I think I just liked some of the tunes that some of the guys had written, and I always liked to experiment with those things, and the particular pieces of music that I did like and felt that they would sound not incorrect on the album just because of the personnel. You know, I figured out they'd come out with like a uniformity, which it has. But it was basically because I liked the pieces that the other guys had written, and I wanted to give the guys an opportunity to write things. So it didn't start out as a deliberate thing, like saying, well, this time I'm not going to write everything. It was just that Gary played me a tune and I really liked that, which was City Nights. And then Steve had two tunes, one of which, Made Marian, we'd done live, and Joshua, we actually didn't do that tune live. And I liked both of those tunes. And then Chad, who'd written the piece, which I really liked that piece too, so it was just more or less that I liked them, rather than saying, well, I couldn't be bothered to write any music, or I felt that I didn't have enough music.
When it comes to playing, tell me a little bit about playing the syntax. I mean, how is it different than playing other guitars that you play? Or how was it hard to learn?
Well, it's completely different. And that's one of the things I really like about it, because I guess I've mentioned it a few times in magazines and things I've done before, that I never really wanted to play guitar in the first place. It just kind of happened. And when I first started playing the syntax, it was a real big emotional experience. It felt better to me than the guitar. It felt like that I could develop a relationship with the instrument that had allowed me to express myself more than I could with the guitar, just because I'd always wanted to play a wind instrument, and using a breath controller on the syntax gave me that kind of ability to do that. So I really love the thing, but as far as it being like a guitar, it's very much unlike a guitar, and I guess that's why a lot of guitar players don't like it.
So I guess now, in a sense, then you're more of a multi-instrumentalist than you were a few years ago.
Well, only through Sonics probably. I'm definitely not a multi-instrumentalist. It's just that obviously anything that you've learnt on the guitar, being as that it's a stringed instrument and the notes are on particular frets or whatever, I can, I still understand that on the syntax. That part of it doesn't change, which is great, but the way the instrument feels is completely different.
Let's go back and listen to a little bit more of the record. This track is called City Nights. We're back in the Tustin studio of Alan Holdsworth with Alan, whose intimate album Secrets is going to be coming out this August. We just heard a little bit of City Nights. And you've been at this for quite some time now, haven't you? It's what, the sixth album?
Yeah, it's the sixth one.
And let's see, IOU came first in
IOU album was recorded, I think, in 1980, and I think it came out in the States around 81 or somewhere around there. And then we did the Road Games album.
For another label that we won't mention.
Yeah, Hideous Records. And then we did Metal Fatigue, Tavacron, Sound, and then Secrets.
What do you see, other than, of course, the band and yourself, as being the sort of common thread, or what is it that ties us all together? If you were to take, say, a day of your life and listen to it all chronologically, what would you say about the progression that you've made as a musician and as a composer?
I don't know, other than the fact that I think I made some progress. But other than that, I wouldn't know exactly specifically what it was, because I think each individual is an individual, and sometimes they're not aware of what makes them so. So I think all that I try to do is just kind of follow my heart through the whole thing, and if I feel like I should do this, that's what I do, and if I feel like I should do that, that's what I do. I guess I've always felt that way about music, so I just try to the best of my ability to keep moving, keep this stuff changing.
Moving from the concept of the individual to the group, this last track that we're about to hear, 54 Duncan Terrace, doesn't feature you as prominently as many of the other tunes on Secrets.
Yeah.
How come?
Well, it started out unintentional because there was basically only one solo section in the piece, and I wrote the piece for a friend of mine who died a few years ago. He was a really great piano player. His name was Pat Smythe, and all of the pieces that he used to compose were always very pretty or very melodic, soft kind of pieces. So I wrote this kind of in memory of him, and he was, like I said, a piano player. And after I'd started listening to the basic track when we did it at the studios, I thought, man, Alan Pasqua was an awesome piano player. I just asked him if he'd like to play on the track, and he did, and I just loved what he did. So he played the bulk of the solo, and then I played the very short solo section at the end.
From Alan Holdsworth's album Secrets, 54 Duncan Terrace. We're back in the Tustin studio of Alan Holdsworth, where we've just heard 54 Duncan Terrace from his new album Secrets, which is going to be out this August on intimate tapes and records and compact discs. And gosh, probably at some point we'll have a little computer disc that we can play it as well through your Mac. Little ways off. We were talking during the break about guitars, and you said something real interesting about Steinbergers, that they had something very special about them, and I'd like you to elaborate on that just a little bit.
Well, the very first time I played one, I just got an incredible feeling from it. I just loved the thing, and it made me feel like I felt when I very first picked up the very first guitar. There's a kind of like, I had a resurgence of energy that I felt really, that I wanted to play the guitar again, after I got the Steinberger, which which was an interesting thing to happen. And also, I loved it because of the creative aspect of it too, because most everybody else for the last 20 years has just been a copy of some form of a Fender or a Gibson, and I think that the Steinberger is the only truly significant development in electric guitar for the last 20 years. And I think that not only that, but the thing just sounds great to me. I mean, I love it, and it's the only thing I play.
If you were going to, I realize this is putting you on the spot a little bit, but if you're going to give some advice to someone who is currently practicing and playing and perhaps aspiring someday to being a professional musician, what is it that you'd tell them?
Well, actually, I was talking to Gary Husband about this a few weeks ago, and he made a very keen observation, which was that everybody starts out when they first start playing with something very special of their own, and what happens is they lose it, and the key is to keep it. And rather than being totally engrossed in what other people are doing, to try and figure out what it is that's unique about themselves and nurture that. You know, I think it's really great to be inspired by people, and obviously I'm still inspired by lots of musicians and what I hear, but I try not to let it infiltrate what I really want to do myself. So I try and absorb the quality aspect of it, but not actually what it is in terms of like a mimicry. And I think that's the best possible advice I could give to anybody.
Well, thank you very much for your time. On behalf of Steinberger Guitars and Intima Records, I'm Thane Tierney. We've been speaking with Alan Holdsworth. His new album, Secrets, will be out at the stores this August. So in addition to what you're hearing right now, if you'd like to hear the entire thing, we encourage you highly to find your way down there and get a copy for your own self.